However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says a deal to end the war with Russia is, quote, very far away. Mr. Zelenskyy says that he's hopeful to keep getting American support despite his recent spat with the US president at the White House. He's been publicly upbeat despite the recent upheaval between Western countries that have been helping Ukraine get military hardware and financial aid. The turn of events is unwelcome for Ukraine, whose undermanned army is having a hard time keeping Russian forces at bay. We're now going to bring in Andrew Donaldson from OrdinaryTimes.com for more on the reaction to Friday's chaos in the Oval Office. Andrew, thank you very much for sitting down with us.
Pleasure to be with you.
I want to get into some of the talking points we've seen from those in Trump circles, some of which have been repeated by senior officials, specifically the amount of aid Ukraine has gotten. How much aid has the U.S. actually sent to Ukraine, and what is it being spent on?
Well, the nomenclature there is really, really important. How much has been sent to Ukraine, because we throw around numbers like how much has been spent on Ukraine. A lot of those numbers involve what Congress has appropriated, and those numbers have to be broke down. For example, the Department of Defense, the U.S. DoD, they estimate they've done about $102 billion. That's, of course, a huge number. That's just military related stuff. Of course, there's other things like humanitarian aid, there's been governmental aid, there's been some supplemental things that have routed different ways. So you would have to take all those numbers and put them together. And not all of that, that's not like an ATM where they just wrote Ukraine a check. A lot of that is military provisions, and that goes through the military procurement system. So when Congress actually appropriates that money, it's not just going to Ukraine. That's the total value of goods, services, and equipment that is going to Ukraine. And a lot of those also have backfill contracts, which means a lot of U.S. arms manufacturers either get paid to make those goods, or they're getting the backfill contracts where we send things from the surplus and then the U.S. manufacturers. So there's kind of a double-edged sword on the funding. You can make those numbers say a lot of different things if you want to play with them on a chart. The other part about that is how much is the U.S. spending compared to everybody else. So it is true the U.S. is the single largest provider of any country to Ukraine, but if you compare it to all of Europe, for example, all governments worldwide giving to Ukraine, Europe's about almost 50% of it, and the US is about 42, 43% of it. If you add Canada to the EU, which is kind of the posturing of our current government right now, it's actually almost 60%. It really gets bumped up. So you can play with those numbers all you want to, but appropriated money, spent money, those are terms that really, really matter here if you're going to get to the actual dollar amounts.
And what do you make of the idea that Zelenskyy isn't grateful enough, or that he hasn't said thank you enough?
I find that kind of unbelievable. If you have Google and watch any video whatsoever, he gave an address to a joint session of Congress that included dozens of thank yous. He did thank yous after this. This is a talking point specifically aimed at that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office where he's not thankful enough, because we have 3 years worth of video of him thanking absolutely everybody from D-Day vets to everybody in Europe. He hugs everybody. We have celebrities and politicians that routinely go to Ukraine. He thanks every single one of them. This is all on video. You have hundreds and hundreds of videos of him saying thank you to the U.S. This goes to what people think about Donald Trump directly, as in he has to be thanked directly and constantly. And that is just that specific incident in the Oval Office is the only way you can make that talking point make any sense at all, especially coming from basically instigated by J.D. Vance, who's the vice president and new to this drama.
And one of the stranger critiques was Zelenskyy not wearing a suit. It seemed like a very strange critique at the time, given that Elon Musk is regularly in the Oval Office in a t-shirt and a jacket. Where is this coming from?
Again, this is optics, politics, and a little bit of media savvy here. It's to make him feel lesser than. It's a common critique that is online. It's also very silly. Look, it is a bit of theater where he wears fatigues or the sweats, or he always wears usually a Ukrainian sweatshirt or fatigues that has the Ukrainian trident on it, that sort of thing. That's messaging. That's messaging that, like, look, I'm a wartime leader. I'm being sympathetic to our troops and the people that are suffering. I'm not wearing a suit. He even made the quip to JD Vance, like, yes, of course, I own a suit. He's thousands of pictures of him in suits over the years. Winston Churchill famously went to the White House in a pair of coveralls to represent the British people when he met with FDR one time, smoking a cigar while he did so. That would really break the internet these days. This is, again, this is a piece of theater for social media and for propaganda, and more specifically, for the Trump-friendly media who really wants to back everything that the Trump administration says. This is a common refrain. It's pretty silly in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, Zelensky does it on purpose for media coverage, so the media is going to get a little bit of clapback on it on top of it, but yes, it's very silly.
You mentioned that the need to consistently thank Donald Trump in his presence. Zelensky did apologize somewhat on social media after he sat down with Brett Baer from Fox News. Could he have played his cards differently here, or should he have?
He's not completely innocent in how this went off the rails, but again, this is a Donald Trump specific thing. When you have a meeting with Donald Trump expects you to kiss the ring and be very forgiving to whatever he says. Problem was, he said some things here that Zelensky just couldn't tolerate as a leader of a country. Things like, when you're using terms like peace, Donald Trump is using that word very differently than Zelensky is. Donald Trump wants a deal for the sake of doing a deal so he can say, I did a deal. And for him, peace means the problem goes away and he doesn't have to deal with it. The word peace for Zelensky under these terms would mean surrender to Russia, not we're going to at least, you could even have some realism of, okay, the lines are static. We're going to have to negotiate some lost territory because the lines are static. That's not what Donald Trump's talking about. Both of those men are using the term peace, but they mean very, very different things. It's things like that that really make these things go sideways in a big old hurry. And it's not that Zelensky didn't want to defer to Trump. He has done it. Again, this is all on video. He's deferred to Trump many, many times. He's thanked Trump many, many times. Trump and JD Vance just got into some areas where he just could not do that and go home and hold his head up at the same time. Could he handle it differently? Yes. Did some red lines get crossed where he couldn't go? I think that's fair to say also.
Now, some have pointed out, including yourself, that senior officials like Marco Rubio are now actively advocating against positions that they once held. Why are we seeing such a 180 in the Republican world on the issue of Ukraine?
Because Secretary of State Marco Rubio was sitting to the left of Vice President J.D. Vance, and he expects to switch positions with him in a couple of years. There's a very good chance Marco Rubio will be the vice presidential ticket under a hopefully President Vance from their worldview. That this is all political ambition. You can go back to 2016, what he said about Donald Trump directly. That looks really bad when you see what he's doing now and serving in that administration. Look, Donald Trump runs the Republican Party right now, and he won an election. So that means anybody on the Republican side of politics in America, they're going to either have to kowtow and go along with the Trump program, or they're not going to be involved in the Republican Party. That's the political reality.
Mhm.
And people that are ambitious have made the calculation that we have to go with Donald Trump no matter what. And it's really starting to stretch credulity with some of these folks, like a Marco Rubio, like the comments of Senator Lindsey Graham, where they have to just follow along with whatever Donald Trump says any given minute, even when it changes day to day, like where he called Zelensky a dictator and then said, I don't think I said that right after that, and then turned around and attacked Zelensky again. It's hard for these folks to keep up, but ambition makes strange bedfellows, makes even stranger talking points. And in the world of video and high def video, it can make for some really embarrassing moments that you're going to have to explain down the road.
Andrew, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today.
Anytime, sir.